Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Susana Puelles, a licensed acupuncturist and a holistic hormone and fertility specialist who's been helping women heal their wombs and get pregnant for over a decade. And as a functional and Chinese medicine practitioner, she helps women reverse decades of damage and replenish reserves to fix their cycle, live pain and medication free, while boosting their success at a safe, natural pregnancy. And in this episode, we'll be discussing holistic approaches that you can take to optimize egg and sperm quality via the traditional Chinese medicine lens. So welcome, Susana. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so I have no idea if you know anything about my story, but traditional Chinese medicine did play a role in my fertility journey. And part of that was healing my body after 13 years of hormonal birth control. So I really resonate with your bio and kind of what your mission is. So I'm just excited to dive in with you today. And I feel like my first question is, why hormones? Why fertility? What sparked that passion for you?
Definitely. Well, before my holistic journey as an acupuncturist and in that world, I was an assistant to an OBGYN. And that was one of my first jobs out of high school, believe it or not. And I worked in the back end clinic. I saw things that as an adult, I was thinking, wow, I would never really want my daughter to see. It was back end clinic stuff. And so I was in that world and I wanted to just pursue that. That's what I knew. That's what I enjoyed. But I did notice that the only thing we really did in terms of clinical care was some type of in-office surgery and medication, those two being hormone replacement and birth control. So at that time in my life, in my later teens and then in my 20s, birth control was free and I was taking it because of my skin and just because it was there. And because my boss said, here, it's okay. You have hormones. Didn't think anything of it. And as I pursued medical school or wanting to become an OBGYN, eventually I burned out and I came across an acupuncturist. And I had no idea about this paradigm at all because I had been so Western, so in clinical care, OBGYN, Western medicine. And this woman, my acupuncturist at the time, she sat down with me for 45 minutes, just asking me questions. Questions I can honestly say I didn't even think about, and here I was in hormonal care, right? But there were questions about my period, my cycle, how often, what do I eat? How do I sleep? Basic lifestyle questions. And I really didn't even think about it until then. And I really thought it was strange that she gave me 45 minutes to talk to me because up until that moment, we only had 5 to 10 minutes in clinic with a patient, and that includes taking their blood pressure and temperature. And so then the acupuncture really blew my mind. It was just so relaxing. And then that's when I realized, I did have a hormonal imbalance and my poor skin, was being deflected and it was reflecting in my hormone and digestive health. And when I started to put all these together was when I went to the acupuncturist and I knew, yes, I had these hormone imbalances and I always just thought I was moody and a hot mess, and just taking on too many jobs or doing too much. But yes, it was my blood sugar was off. My digestive health was horrible. I mean, my favorite food was strawberries dipped in powdered sugar and condensed milk on top. I mean, that was my that was my favorite food. And looking at it now, of course I was a moody mess. And then so eventually I pursued acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I never looked back into what could have been in the allopathic world because these were questions that weren't answered in my own health. And I pursued that in terms of acupuncture and herbs with women's health because that's what I just knew. And I was really just excited to do it and change, your skin and your mood and help you do that with food and nutrition and herbs. Herbs were my favorite forms of quote unquote medication, but medicines. And that was my journey for years until I wanted to get pregnant. And then I started having trouble and miscarriages. And I thought, well, this is very strange. I've dedicated myself to making my health better. I thought I knew better now because I had all these different tools, what was happening. And I eventually got pregnant. And both times in both of my pregnancies, I developed cholestasis in the 28th week. And I mean, but that's a very high risk condition. And it just comes with so much trauma because the liver gallbladder essentially decreases function, and I'm recycling all of the toxins that are coming in from the food or the toxins I already had built up in my system. And if it crossed the placenta, we could possibly have a stillbirth situation. And the first time it was extremely scary. My baby was okay, but the doctors told me, don't worry, this doesn't really happen twice. And then after it happened with my second birth, they were perplexed and they wanted to actually put me in a study, but I said, no, I have newborns and children to take care of. But then on my own, I was really let down by myself and what I didn't know. And, all this, what could I have done? Would have, could have, should have stuff, especially being in the holistic field. I felt like I should have known better, but I didn't because there's so much more to learn. And at that point afterward, people just came around me that put the pieces together. That's when I had a colleague who was starting to teach functional medicine across the country. And up until that point, I wasn't doing functional medicine. I was doing acupuncture and herbs and a little bit of nutrition here and there. But then he opened my eyes and said, let's take it to the next level. With your herbs, we can figure out how your gut's doing, but we have to test your gut. We have to test what toxins were probably in your body before you conceived and, just took you over the edge and your poor little liver couldn't do it when you were pregnant. And I tested myself and I was just blown away by what was in my body. And that was even after pregnancies. So beforehand, I just think about how shocking it was what we carry into it. And so after that, started cleaning my lifestyle out even more, putting together how I could help other women, because that became my passion of just pre-conception care, which is something I didn't even conceptualize, even with my first pregnancy. I made my plans. I knew I could go to my acupuncturist. I had the best doulas in the town I lived in. I wanted this home birth. None of that happened because I became high risk. But I had everything I thought mapped out, except in these deeper imbalances that I didn't know until afterward. And when I started putting them together, I created my own protocols to help other women, because now it's my passion to really kind of make sure women really understand we're up against a lot. It's not just stress. Our environment's kind of working against us. And And there are tools that we have to use to prepare ourselves, and that's if you get pregnant naturally, but especially if we know we might have frozen eggs or we go through the IVF process, because that is another level of, I want to say toxicity, but I want to be easy about that word. It's just a form of, how we're going to get pregnant, but it is synthetic hormones and your body has to be ready. So whatever little part I can do in the fertility world to prevent anybody from having a high risk complication just like melts my heart, because it is a very traumatic place to be in, to have a high risk pregnancy and go through that. Because, clearly when you map things out in your pregnancy, you want it to be easy and safe and this beautiful experience. And some of the realities, especially being in OBGYN care, were not that. And so we do have to bring awareness, but I think that awareness comes years before we're even thinking about getting pregnant. That's the tricky part.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a beautiful story and so many things I want to touch on. But so I'm a pharmacist as my background, and it is interesting, like what you experienced when you were going to school to be an OBGYN, and then, my kind of clinical experience in the pharmacy world. There's just so many things that we do not learn about our bodies that I feel like for instance, when you finally learned it, and then when I finally learned it, it was just like, oh my gosh, light bulb moment. And it's such a disconnection between the Western medicine world. And yeah, it's just fascinating how there's just such a disconnect. And this is kind of like a sidebar note, but the fact that you got so burnt out when you were going to OBGYN school, to me, that's just meant that that was so out of alignment for you and your purpose in this life. So I love that you connected with someone in acupuncture and you just fell in love with it and then pursued it, because it it really is a beautiful way to support people and their health. And even after my experience, like I have considered it would be a really nice thing for me to even pursue someday, because it's just a beautiful healing modality. So I love what you're doing and that you really focus and touch on that preconception phase, which is so important on so many different levels. And I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of women or couples have no idea how important it is. I feel like we focus so much on maybe things that are in the future, kind of like how you were mentioning you had the doula, the most amazing doula that you could have for the birth. And a lot of people spend time on, getting all the cute stuff for the baby registry and maybe doing the nursery. But we as a society can't spare a moment to even create that space for us to really get our bodies in that overflowing vitality, which, like you had mentioned, is going to set you up for a healthy pregnancy, ideally without any high risk factors coming up, hopefully a healthy birth and a healthy postpartum. I don't really know what they found when they did that test for you, but I imagine there were toxins of some sort, and I'd be curious what your postpartum experience looked like, if you felt like depleted or what that was for you.
Well, that's an interesting question, because postpartum with my first son, I was fine. And I felt like I needed to be superwoman.
Hmm.
I was strong and, so I gave birth, and then, a week or two later, I was trying to clean my house and, and things like that. But I remember day two coming home from the hospital, and the nurses, that was my first baby. And so I was in the hospital, and then the nurse is saying, okay, you get to go home today. And I said, really? What do I do? I was scared. And then when we went home, I remember the next day, I started just crying incessantly. And I called my friend on the phone and I was just saying, "What have I done? What have I done? This isn't right. What did I do?" I was just having a moment of utter regret and fear. And she's like talking me through it. These are the hormones. You just came home from the hospital. They're crashing. And, even my acupuncturist was saying, this is going to happen. This is completely normal. And again, I thought I was prepared for this. I had built myself up but it was happening 2 days after the hospital, and I could not believe what I was saying. Like, I didn't want to do this. This was a mistake. Things that, you wouldn't think that a new mom would say, but my hormones crashed and I let it go. And then I let people take care of me.
Mm.
I let people for the next couple of weeks take care of me. And it helped. I started making soups, what they made soups for me with all the herbs, tonifying herbs that we talk about. And then I had my acupuncturist come to my house and things leveled out. And so I remember that was the most intense part of my post-pregnancy, that phone call. And not thinking that that could have happened, that was going to happen to me. My second baby, I didn't have any of that. I still had the fear of, the cholestasis progressing, but when I had him, it was fine. I took care of myself day of. Breastfeeding was very important to me. Everything was totally normal. And I felt like I had built myself up a little bit more.
Mhm.
So postpartum is a very real thing, but it did not last months for me.
Mhm.
The first time was very, very scary because I just thought, of all of these things that were coming through my mind, but it was the lowest point that your hormones could be. And so I was like having an anxiety attack, panic attack. I've never had that before, but the second baby, I didn't. I was a little bit more prepared and calm, and we knew everything was fine.
Yeah.
And I think the herbs for me helped a lot too,
Mhm.
even though my doctors told me I shouldn't be taking any herbs. And with cholestasis, there's no medication. There's nothing to do other than induction at 37 weeks. And so they told me, don't mess around with herbs. And of course I did. I took some basic liver cleansing herbs, and I think those helped for postpartum as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Really setting yourself up. And you had started that functional testing after your first, right?
After the second.
Oh, after the second. Okay.
After the second, because the first one, I was just building my body back up. And then, I had this newborn, I was a new mom. And, it went by fast, 2, 3 years. And then I had the second one. And because it was also my OBGYNs and the postpartum doctor I saw, they were like, oh, don't worry about it. If anything, it only happens one time. And, this isn't going to affect your fertility. And your liver exam, your liver markers completely shifted the next day.
Mm.
So my AST, all of the liver markers that were quadruple through the roof, those shifted as soon as I gave birth to my first baby. Those shifted, went down to normal levels the day after I gave birth. It was pretty
Wow.
amazing, pretty amazing. And so at that point, I really didn't do functional medicine. It was after my second baby that my friends were into it. My colleague happened to be one of the biggest speakers in the circuit. And his wife, one of my best friends, she's like, you really need to talk to him. And I did. And that's when it just blew my mind. And, part of it was after my second baby, I felt like I wasn't done having children. I wanted more. I loved it. I wanted a bigger family. And then so I did start the process of cleansing and all of this, of putting myself through functional protocols and creating my own and using herbs and things. But then there was a point where I said, you know what? I'm not even gonna, I feel good, but I'm not going to risk it. It happened twice. It was so traumatic. I have PTSD from it. And why risk it a third time?
Hmm.
And I just let it go. And then that's when I just shifted my practice and my life to my kids, and then just helping others, just making sure we're just set up.
Hmm. Yeah. I can imagine that that was a difficult decision to make, but I can understand why. And I can
Yeah.
only imagine what, because I know like there's a lot of like that makes your body itchy too, right? I remember reading about that.
Yes, that's how it presented the first time. One day, it was the day after Thanksgiving, my first pregnancy. It was the day after Thanksgiving. My palms and the bottom of my feet were hot, really, really hot and really itchy. And I thought, whoa, I must have eaten something really weird last night. And it didn't go away for a couple of hours. And then I called my nurse practitioner and I said, this is happening and this is happening. But yesterday was Thanksgiving. And she said, get in here right now. Get in the car and come see me right now.
Um,
And I mean, we're in healthcare. You never get an appointment that day, that minute. And she said it very severe. And I thought, oh my God, something's happening. And then that's when they did a ton of labs and they came back and they told me. And I said, well, what now? And they said, well, nothing. You have to come and be monitored every single week. Once a week, you have to be monitored for 2 hours. And then the itching, we could give you something to thin out the gallbladder, but they said it doesn't work. So you might as just well not take it. And that was it. And the only thing that was going to alleviate the itching was induction at 37 weeks.
wow. And
Yeah.
how many weeks were you when that started?
That was 28 weeks
Oh gosh, wow.
and the itching started.
Mm,
And with my second baby, I was swimming a lot. And I didn't really think about it until about 30 weeks or so, because maybe there was a place where I didn't want to know. And I was just thinking, well, maybe, I'm feeling a little red or tight in the skin, but it was not to the level that the first baby was.
mm,
And so I thought, well, maybe my skin's kind of dry because I was swimming a lot during that pregnancy. And then I went to get scanned and they did the blood test at about 32 weeks. And they said, it's come back and you're going to be induced in 5 weeks. And, my heart was just sad because it was so shocking that it happened the second time, because I thought I didn't do anything drastic in between, but I thought I did better. I thought I was eating more vegetables and drinking more water and doing more herbs, but it just wasn't enough to counter whatever was lighting up that inflammation in my body.
mm,
And so luckily, both of my boys, they were born, they were induced, but they came out, natural births, even with an induction, and they're healthy. And I just move forward, and I'm obsessed with liver health because of it.
mhm.
Even though I know I'm not going to get pregnant again, I know I'm still fertile, but I'm obsessed with liver health and, longevity at this point.
Well, I think things like that happen in our lives to sometimes push us down a path that we're meant to go on. So for you, that's really being passionate about supporting women in this preconception phase and focusing on liver health, which is so important in this day and age because there's just toxins all around us. Some we can control, some we cannot. So yeah, so I would really love to kind of dive into that. So hormones and fertility, that's what you focus on. What are some of the most, and I don't know if this is the right word, but like most common ailments or things that women need to work on when they work with you for fertility?
Oh, it depends on what they're coming in for. I love treating womb imbalances. So I'm thinking, anything that shouldn't be in the womb that is. So cysts, polyps, fibroids. I
Mm-hmm.
really like to just move that and shift it and clean out the womb. So for me, when you're coming in to work with me on that level, that's our goal, using herbs to clean out that residue and and then getting you set up for a space for a baby to grow. I would say blood sugar is number one that most women really kind of ignore because we're working a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We work throughout the day, and when we get focused, we tend to ignore the break, either even for water or just a snack. And so that sets us up for high cortisol levels and then, fight or flight and then low progesterone. So I think blood sugar is one of the big things. And you do not have to be diabetic or insulin resistant to have this imbalance. And that's one of the big things is people wait for a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the pitfalls of alternative or complementary medicine is we're trying to prevent that diagnosis because once you get it, it'll take a lot longer to reverse it. So we want to coach you through good habits, just basic lifestyle changes and just that acknowledgement that you've done nothing bad. It's just we grew up doing different things that we're not aware of. So we just need to take a moment to get back to thinking of that medical timeline. When did I have these cravings? Or I had cravings? Oh, that was bad. Like condensed condensed milk with strawberry and powdered sugar. I could see the timeline of really poor gut health there, leading to pimples and then, birth control and liver issues and all of these things. And so that's where we start is mostly blood sugar because that gets us into gut health. That's immune health. And then all of it is toxic,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. And so the end result is that liver cleanse. And also acknowledging that, when I speak to women, they're like, oh, well, I did a fertility cleanse, 3 months ago for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or a month cleanse, me and my husband. Great. But those are not what we are talking about here. We're talking about decades, years of embedded toxins like aluminum, glyphosate, pesticides, plastics, formaldehyde, things that your everyday life you're not aware of are lodged in your system. And a 2 week cleanse with milk thistle tea is not going to do this for us. So just getting people on track to understand there's different tiers and we start where I meet you, but there is a system to the madness that, needs to be addressed at some point, especially if you're coming in to see me with an already established hormone imbalance like fibroids or cysts or endometriosis or hypothyroidism. All of those are, for me, environmental exposure issues. They are not hormonal. You only get that label because you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, everything really comes down to an environmental exposure. And that's where I kind of meet people. It's like, how are we going to clean this up? And you're going to walk away feeling great. Going to know you're going to have good cell health, not only for good egg and sperm quality, but after that baby's born, your hormones are going to be on point and you're going to set yourself up for longevity because that's all you want. You want to grow with these babies. You want to have a lot of energy with the toddlers and, up until you're a wise woman yourself.
Yeah. So if someone's presenting and they have, whether it's insulin resistance or maybe not to that point yet, what are some of your like go-to lifestyle changes or just other things that you recommend for them to work on that?
Yeah, so if you have a craving for sugars or salts, and we're not at insulins, we're not at PCOS, we're not at diabetes, those are red flags. And it could be just awareness. Are you eating every 2 to 3 hours? And it doesn't have to be a huge meal, but just set yourself up for hydration and a snack or something with protein or fat. And The other thing is we always start with anything green. Anything green or slightly bitter. With me, you're going to start with cruciferous vegetables for a while
Hmm.
because it's going to start to clean you out, not in a detox way, but in the way that that craving for sugar is calling for. The sugar is sweet, so that means your digestive health is imbalanced. The recipe in terms of Chinese medicine or holistic health is bitter. So we're going to want those cruciferous cleansing vegetables like radishes, cabbage, and a little bit of raw goes a long way, but it could all be steamed or cooked. And I'm not saying just eat a salad. I want you to eat real food, like whole food, but with cruciferous vegetables. Always. You can't go wrong with that, especially with sugar.
Hmm. Okay, I've never heard that. If you're having sugar cravings, that your body's craving bitter. That's interesting.
Yeah, because so the sugar is the digestive system in Chinese medicine. So that's earth. And so the remedy for earth is a little bit of wood, which is liver. And so it's more, it will ground it. And so those are bitters. So dandelion greens, even a dandelion tea or a dandelion root tea, nettle tea can really start to offset some of these sugar cravings.
Mm.
And those can increase the week before, or maybe 3 days before the onset of your period for good measure, because your progesterone's going down so you can have a period. So it's only natural. It's not abnormal to crave sugar, but the remedy is not birth control, or it's not, an insulin patch or something like that. It can be food, and it could be simple herbs.
Hmm. Love that. And I'm just curious, like, so someone who has really bad sugar cravings, how quickly or how long does it take for incorporating more of those bitter foods into their diet for them to be like, oh, I I don't really crave sweets anymore?
It can be as fast as 2 to 3 weeks, believe it or not. I with my patients, I really do start them on kind of my form of reset, which is basically just using food to really start to clean you out, but also balance your hormones because, food is estrogenic, right? So it can take 2 to 3 weeks depending on how fast your body is cleaning out. And when you're having sugar cravings, yes, it's the insulin, but it's also a bunch of little bugs in your gut that are dying off because you are not giving it what they want. And
Mm.
when they die, they outgas and they manipulate your brain chemistry to force you to have those cravings, right? So sometimes it's kind of like you're not even in control. And so a lot of it is how fast you're going to have die off and kill off these bugs. And once those are tame, and then the good bacterias and the viral load and the fungus go down relative to your gut bacteria, then they should be gone. And if you have some weight problems, you will literally melt that off if you do it right. You will want more water. Your body will tell you. And we can easily do that as simple with food and as little as 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm.
Because your gut will clean out every 30 days, roughly, if we give it that environment to
Hmm.
and then balance itself out.
Amazing. Very cool. Yeah, so I'd love to hear anything you'd like to share on how you work with clients to optimize their egg health, or if their partners are involved, their sperm health. And yeah, just kind of your take on that.
Definitely. Well, like I said earlier, what I've really discovered along the way is up to 90% of what we're seeing now, especially in fertility, but any disease diabetes or even heart disease, and definitely with fertility challenges, 90% of it is environmental. And yes, most of it we can't control. It's too much, but there's so much that we can really offer. Clean up the diet. That for me, diet is about nutrition and just knowing which foods to just avoid. and not just these processed Doritos. If you eat too many eggs, that might be contributing to your husband's poor sperm count. Eggs are estrogenic. So I work with people to modify these things. I have some husbands that they eat 5 eggs every morning with poor sperm count. And when we modify just the egg count, guess what happens in 60 days?
Mm-hmm.
Little things like that, just looking at how food plays a significant role in your internal and external environment. I help people with that. There's a little bit of testing because I want to see how much pesticides you have in your system, how many heavy metals, especially for men, because men, most of it is aluminum and mercury, high levels of it, lower sperm count. That's really in the data. If you have endometriosis or fibroids, but especially endo, I'm going to do like a metals analysis because I want to see how much cadmium you have in your system because we associate more higher cadmium with endometriosis. And poor egg quality, or what if you've been to a fertility specialist and you have been told you have poor egg quality, which I think is really sad because women aren't told that in as little as 90 days or even maybe 6 months that your cells regenerate.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with testing a little bit, but then doing the basics. What are we going to do nutritionally to heal the gut first, set you up for good kidney and adrenal health and thyroid health? And then at the end, we're going to heal the liver so that all of this is eventually working in a new internal environment, a pH balanced environment, so that your egg quality is just optimized every single month as you're trying. And that's exactly what I do with nutrition. I use a lot of herbs because I really do believe in them. They're the best for longevity. They're the best. I really try to modify a lot of supplementation and switch it to herbs because they just work better with food integration and overwhelm the patients a little bit less. And just cooking with herbs and things like that are the big guns. And that's how we start to reverse some of the damage that's been done to your gut, to the liver, and definitely to the kidneys, because you need kidney jing or essence for fertile health. And most of it is toxic based. Clean that out safely, and you are on track for a healthy, safe pregnancy, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah, it's a very well-rounded, holistic approach. So do you typically work just in person or are you virtual as well? Because obviously you're an acupuncturist. So like when does that kind of come into the patient care model? Does everyone get acupuncture or is that just like on a case-by-case basis?
It is. I've been doing acupuncture by its own for 15 years. And then after my pregnancies, I realized, okay, well, acupuncture isn't enough. And most of my patients, before they come to me, they've been with an acupuncturist for a year or maybe even two. And it's because it's not enough, right? With acupuncture, I can't delve into getting that mercury out of your system safely or that excess copper in your ovaries that are, creating poor egg quality. So acupuncture is not enough these days. So I do a little bit of both. I'm mostly virtual now. So I treat women across the country and even in South America and virtual. So you're my patient. I see you once a week. You're in my program. If I need to send you herbs because I feel like this is what you're going to need, I send them to you. And that's how I've been working locally. If you want to come see me for acupuncture, then that's available. But the power is in the functional part of just taking the time and investing in yourself and your future babies and future longevities, because it's not just about babies, it's about longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting the plumbing all worked out But acupuncture is like the cherry on top. We're going to relax and feel great and let the blood flow. But with acupuncture, the blood can flow, but that doesn't mean it's healthy blood sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we really do have to go deeper and kind of fix all this internal medicine stuff, what I call the plumbing, and then take it to that next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because I can see where if you were someone who was going to seek out acupuncture, but you weren't taking care of like the nutritional lifestyle side of it, it's just kind of, I feel like the bad is going to outweigh the good that the acupuncture is doing. So I can
Yeah.
absolutely resonate with that. So I see that you have Yoni Sink. It's an herbal elixir product line. So I would love for you to share more about that.
Yes, so I love my herbs. I believe in them. And so I created some herbs, specifically elixirs, because they're just so easy to take. You could just put them in hot water and be done and drink some water. And that, they're a combination of adaptogenic herbs, so longevity herbs, liver tonics, and really just uniquely created formulas for women's health. There's Elevate, which is more of a moving formula. So that was for women who had more PMS, more fibroids, cysts, things we have to move, right?
Mm,
Move, clean the blood. And those are available. And then there's tonics, like the longevity tonic is a really wonderful one for egg quality, longevity. But again, we have to move out any toxins that are in the body before we delve into that. And then there's the powders, the everyday herbs that you can infuse. And all of them are based off of your cycle. So the mineral rich ones that have the chaga and the reishi mushroom powders, as well as the other herbs, the herbal bundles, all of them are formulated in the two phases of your cycle, the follicular and the luteal. And you just switch over because these herbs are meant to work with your cycle and what your hormones are doing during those phases of the moon or phases of the month to help you clean out a little bit and just do it at home and create those habits that you can just easily take on into motherhood and your everyday health. So
mhm.
that's Yoni Sink for you.
Amazing. Do you have like an online store or do people just kind of go to you to order that?
Oh yeah, I have an online store. I can send you the link easily and, via Instagram, but my shop is online, definitely.
Awesome. So cool. So if any particular client success story comes to mind, one, with fertility, I would love to hear it.
Oh, which one? Which one? Oh, I was thinking the other day of a woman who I helped. Her name was Nico, and she had Asherman syndrome. And Asherman's is, I'm sure you know, but for your listeners, the uterine wall gets very, very thick. It increases, and that's not a good thing in this case because it gets too thick to the point that implantation becomes a problem. She had been trying, and of course, then she was diagnosed with it. And they told her, listen, the only way you are getting pregnant, she was about 37, 38. The only way you're getting pregnant, of course, is with IVF.
Mm.
And she said, no, I don't want to do that. And they said, well, why don't you try IUI? So she tried it twice, and unfortunately, it was not successful. And she found me during this time. And then we started working together nutritionally, herbally. I remember she was really obsessed with kickboxing. And I asked her, we have to just pause on that for a second, just trying to calm her adrenals. And herbally, she just the lining of the uterus started to shed appropriately during her cycles. Her cycles regulated after about 8 weeks, which is pretty phenomenal,
Wow.
pretty phenomenal for Asherman syndrome. And in a 4.5 months, she had baby Jasmine. She got pregnant and she had a complete, successful, healthy pregnancy, no high risk complications. And her husband was he was about 20 years older than her. He was a lot older too. So, I mean, these things happen. So even though you have been told the only way you're getting pregnant with IVF, don't settle. It's about taking 10 steps back and then making sure we start to fine tune and clean out the body.
Yeah.
And then afterward, her postpartum was totally fine. And she had regular periods ever since. And so her condition had really stabilized. And so that's one of them. And I have a couple. Now I can, the next 30 minutes, I can just talk about my patients. I love them so much. And they're such an inspiration. And when they send me the testimonials, I cry and I just think like, I helped with that. And it never gets old.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see just the power of them believing that they have the ability to change their body, and really after being told, you're too old, your eggs are dried up, this isn't going to happen, or that's very dangerous, or, birth control is the only way, and seeing it not happen. And it's so inspiring. And so I do look back on the testimonials in most of my patients to think like this works.
Yeah, that's so good because kind of what you had mentioned earlier is if you're told, oh, you have poor egg quality, like that's not the end all be all. It's not black and white like that. So I love how you said just take 10 steps back, take a deep breath. I know that a lot of times doctors can say things that are pretty much brutal. And unfortunately, sometimes we can accept that as like our truth or almost like our death sentence in terms of our fertility. But you're so right. Like, there are so many things that we have the ability and the power to change. It's just really having that faith and trust and that belief in yourself and finding a practitioner that you feel aligned with, like yourself or a fertility coach like me as well. Just there's so many options. And that is one good thing about the internet these days is like it's all available at your fingertips, really. So I absolutely love that. That was a beautiful, beautiful share. And I know that you have a freebie for our audience, a master class about the 4 fertility fixes.
Yeah, definitely. I do discuss, the importance of, how these cells regenerate. I really want people to understand that because the IVF industry is an industry that breaks you down. Okay, they've helped people, but a lot of women leave thinking there's no hope. I have poor egg quality and their cells, they regenerate. That just means we're going to have to take some time to clean things up and balance what we need to balance and give that nutrition, target that nutrition to your eggs or other places in your body that you're deficient in. So it really helps you understand where I'm coming from of just setting yourself up. Right environment is crucial for you and your future babies. And it's all regenerative. It's just like a plant. If you nourished a plant that's pretty much dry and on its last little stem and you don't think it's gonna gonna get better, little by little a little sprout might pop up, but you got to give it time. And we have to walk into these situations, especially the medical industry, with a different awareness. And I think the more practitioners we have doing this, like you, like me, other women in this industry, the better we're going to support other women beyond being told you waited too long or there's nothing else you can do other than severe intervention, which it's not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I like to envision is anyone that like even just you and I help, anyone that we help, and then they can pass on this knowledge to their children, and then their children can pass it on. And it's just this like
Yeah,
beautiful ripple effect of like autonomy and awareness and just, educating and empowerment too. So it's really a beautiful thing.
it
Um,
is. It is. It's about, helping the next generation too, having that awareness. If mama has it, everybody in the family is going to have it, you know, at the levels where they're at. And that's what we can hope for. And just that level of awareness and that spark. And I think we'll be in a good place. But some of the information is daunting, but don't let it be daunting. It's really just there in our face. And we just have to use the tools. And really, it's about finding somebody that's in alignment that you trust and moving forward because it's going to happen. Your body is built to change and regenerate whatever you need out of it. I've seen it. I mean, it's happened to me, and my liver is really happy with me right now. And that's how I set myself up for moving forward. And my kids know it, and everybody benefits.
mhm. Absolutely. So where can the listeners connect with you, maybe to learn more from you if they want to explore your services and your Yoni Sync line as well?
Absolutely. You can find me at yoni.sync on Instagram, or that's my website, Yoni Sync. So it's YONISYNC.com. And I have a free offer for you. And then there's also an herbal guide of some of my favorite herbal herbs that you can try, that they're really good for longevity and fertility. And so that's on my website as well for you for free. And you can also book a call with me if you wanted to discuss a little bit about how I can help you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, thanks so much for being on and sharing your story and just your wisdom that you have really cultivated over the years and just for everything that you do to help women.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was very sweet.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.